Imagine a deal so massive, it reshapes not only a continent's infrastructure but also the balance of global power. China has just struck a jaw-dropping $10 billion railway deal in Africa. But this isn't just about building tracks. In exchange, China has secured access to a staggering 16 billion tons of iron ore, one of the most vital resources for the modern world. This single pact could fuel China's steel industry for decades, power its construction boom, and give it the upper hand in global manufacturing. Meanwhile, the West watches from the sidelines, unable to match Beijing's bold, high-stakes diplomacy. This isn't just a railway. It's a geopolitical chess move. Let's break it down. China's Belt and Road Initiative has already transformed landscapes across Asia, Europe, and Africa. But now, Beijing is making one of its most ambitious plays yet. In West Africa, where untapped mineral riches lie buried beneath rugged terrain, lies a jackpot of iron ore, the lifeblood of steel production. For years, Western corporations eyed these deposits, but political instability, infrastructure challenges, and sheer cost kept them away. Enter China. Instead of demanding profits upfront, Beijing offered something no one else would: a $10 billion railway connecting remote mines to ports on the Atlantic coast. This railway won't just move minerals. It will change lives, economies, and entire nations. Villages long cut off from the world will now have access to trade routes. Jobs will be created. Cities will expand. And Africa will find itself tied closer than ever to China's economic orbit. But what does China get in return? Access to a mind-blowing 16 billion tons of iron ore. Enough to keep its steel furnaces roaring, its skyscrapers rising, and its shipyards building for generations. The West? They are furious. For decades, Africa was seen as their backyard, a place for cheap resources and political influence. But China has flipped the script. Instead of military bases or political lectures, China offers concrete, steel, and railroads. And Africans are taking notice. This deal is more than trade. It's trust. Western critics call it debt trap diplomacy. They say Africa is selling its future. But from the African perspective, this is a golden opportunity. Billions in infrastructure, roads, and railways projects the West promised but never delivered. And here's the kicker: once the railway is complete, it won't just carry iron ore. It will become a highway of commerce, linking farmers, traders, and industries across the region. A deal for iron becomes a catalyst for growth. The scale is staggering. 16 billion tons of iron ore is enough to produce over 10 billion tons of steel, the backbone of skyscrapers, bridges, railroads, and warships. And while the West debates carbon footprints and trade restrictions, China is locking down the raw materials of the future. For Beijing, it's a double victory. Secure vital resources. Expand influence in Africa. For the West, it's a warning: the age of Western dominance in Africa is fading fast. This deal is proof. So here's the question: is Africa becoming a pawn in China's global strategy, or is it finally seizing the opportunity to rise alongside a new partner? Because make no mistake, this railway is not just a line of steel across the African landscape. It is a line drawn in the sand of history. To understand the true magnitude of this deal, we need to look back. For decades, Africa has been seen as a continent rich in resources but starved of infrastructure. Vast mineral wealth sat locked beneath the soil: gold, diamonds, oil, and, most importantly, iron ore. Yet without railroads, highways, and ports, those resources were trapped, inaccessible to global markets. The West knew this. Multinational corporations had their eyes on Africa's treasure troves, but the investments needed to unlock them were simply too large. Instead of building, the West extracted what was easy, leaving much of Africa disconnected and underdeveloped. Then came China. In the early 2000s, Beijing launched the Belt and Road Initiative, a project so ambitious it stunned the world. Trillions of dollars poured into roads, bridges, ports, and pipelines, weaving a new Silk Road across continents. And Africa became one of the centerpiece frontiers of this vision. China didn't come with lectures about democracy. It didn't come with conditions tied to human rights reports. Instead, it came with bulldozers, steel beams, and investment capital. It asked one simple question: what do you need built? And for Africa, the answer was clear: railroads. Because railways are not just transportation. They are economic arteries. They connect remote mines to international ports, farmers to city markets, and small towns to national economies. This latest $10 billion railway project is a perfect example. By laying tracks across previously isolated regions, China is not only opening pathways for trade but also physically binding African economies closer to Beijing. And the prize? A mountain of iron ore, 16 billion tons. To put this in perspective, if you loaded all that iron ore into train wagons, the line of railcars would stretch around the Earth more than 100 times. That's how much raw material China has secured with this one deal. For China, this is priceless. Steel is the backbone of modern civilization. Every skyscraper, every bridge, every ship, every high-speed rail line, all of it requires steel. And steel requires iron ore. China already produces more than half of the world's steel. But with its rapid urbanization and military modernization, demand is relentless. Securing long-term supplies is not just an economic need, it's a matter of national security. And here's where the geopolitics get interesting. The West, especially the United States and Europe, are increasingly worried. Their influence in Africa has been eroding for years. Once, Western powers dictated trade deals and controlled access to Africa's resources. Today, African nations are turning east, choosing Beijing as their partner. Why? Because China offers something different. When Western powers approach Africa, they often come with conditions: governance reforms, IMF restrictions, or military involvement. But when China comes, it comes with contracts, construction crews, and cranes. For African leaders, the choice is obvious. Partner with a nation that delivers tangible results, or stick with countries that talk more than they build. But critics argue there's a hidden cost. Some Western analysts call this a new form of colonialism. They claim China is creating debt dependency, locking African nations into repayment cycles they cannot escape. They warn that Africa could end up trading one master for another. Yet from the African perspective, the picture looks different. After decades of being ignored, many leaders see China as the first major power to take Africa seriously. Where the West hesitated, China acted. Where the West stalled, China delivered. And the people see results: new railways, new ports, new power plants. The West says Africa is falling into a trap. Africans reply, at least someone is building. But beyond the politics lies a deeper truth. This railway deal will transform not only China and Africa, but the entire global economy. With secure access to 16 billion tons of iron ore, China can keep its steel industry roaring without relying on suppliers like Australia and Brazil, countries that are often aligned with the West. This reduces Beijing's vulnerability and increases its independence. For Africa, the railway means opportunity. Once the tracks are laid, they won't just carry iron ore. They will become highways of commerce, opening up agriculture, tourism, and trade. What starts as a deal for minerals could become the foundation of a new economic era. And for the West? It's a warning shot. Because while Washington and Brussels debate policies, Beijing is laying down steel, mile by mile, across Africa. This is more than business. It's a battle for the future. 1. The iron ore jackpot. Deep in the heart of Africa lies one of the greatest untapped treasures on Earth. Iron ore reserves so massive, they could reshape the global steel market. Countries like Guinea, Sierra Leone, and Liberia sit atop mountains of this precious resource. In Guinea alone, the Simanda mountain range is believed to hold the largest undeveloped iron ore deposit in the world. For decades, mining giants from the West looked at these reserves with hungry eyes. But the cost of building the railways and ports to extract them? Too high. The political risks? Too dangerous. So the iron stayed buried. Until now. China looked at the challenge differently. Instead of asking, how much profit can we make immediately? Beijing asked, what long-term power can we gain? And the answer was clear: by building a railway worth $10 billion, China could unlock not just ore, but influence, alliances, and leverage for decades. In return for their investment, China gains access to a staggering 16 billion tons of iron ore. Enough to keep their steel industry supplied for generations, enough to secure independence from Western-dominated suppliers, and enough to reinforce China's position as the industrial heart of the world. 2. Why railways matter more than ore. But here's the secret many overlook: the railway itself is the true prize. For Africa, this $10 billion line of steel tracks is more than a mining conveyor belt. It's a lifeline of development. Think of the villages, towns, and cities along the route. Until now, many of these communities were cut off, isolated by geography, lacking access to markets. Farmers struggled to get crops to buyers. Traders struggled to move goods. Entire economies stagnated because roads were too poor and ports too far. With the railway, everything changes. Farmers can now sell crops across borders. Small businesses can trade with cities hundreds of kilometers away. Tourism opens up as previously remote regions become accessible. Jobs will be created not just in mining, but in transport, trade, and industry. In short, what begins as a railway for ore could become the backbone of an African economic revolution. And China knows it. Because whoever builds the arteries of trade builds the future of nations. 3. The West watches, frustrated. Now, imagine sitting in Washington, London, or Paris, watching all of this unfold. For centuries, the West dominated Africa's resources. European empires carved up the continent, exploiting minerals and people alike. In modern times, Western corporations moved in, taking oil, gold, and diamonds while leaving behind little infrastructure. But today, the narrative has flipped. China has not only entered the game but is rewriting the rules. While Western leaders hold summits and issue statements, Beijing is building rail by rail, port by port, bridge by bridge. The West criticizes. They warn of debt traps. They caution of Chinese overreach. But on the ground in Africa, people are asking a simple question: where was the West when we needed roads, power, and railways? The truth is painful. The West is now reactive, while China is proactive. And in geopolitics, action speaks louder than words. 4. Steel, the silent weapon. Let's not forget what this is really about: steel. Steel is civilization's skeleton. Without it, there are no skyscrapers, no railways, no container ships, no fighter jets, no high-speed trains. Every nation that dreams of power needs steel. And steel needs iron ore. Today, China produces over half of the world's steel. This isn't just about construction, it's about dominance. The ships of the Chinese Navy, the rails of their high-speed trains, the towers of their megacities, all of it depends on iron ore. By securing 16 billion tons of African ore, China is not just fueling growth. It's securing its future against supply disruptions, trade wars, or Western sanctions. It's building a shield made of steel. And while the West remains dependent on unstable supply chains from Australia, Brazil, and beyond, China is locking down its own private supply line, stretching deep into the African continent. 5. Africa's gamble. But here's the most important question: what does Africa gain? Critics argue that Africa risks becoming too dependent on China. That by trading resources for infrastructure, it might be handing over too much power. That instead of building independence, Africa might be forging new chains. But many African leaders see it differently. For decades, they waited for the West to invest, and the West failed them. Roads remained unpaved. Railways remained broken. Dreams of industrialization remained just that, dreams. China, however, brings bulldozers, engineers, and investment. For Africa, it's not about choosing a master. It's about choosing opportunity. This railway might begin as a tool for iron ore exports. But in the long run, it could ignite manufacturing, trade, and jobs. The real gamble isn't whether Africa relies too much on China. The real gamble is whether Africa can use this partnership to finally rise. This is more than a deal. It's a turning point. China isn't just trading rail for ore. It's trading steel for influence, investment for loyalty, and infrastructure for the future. And as the West looks on, left behind, one thing is clear: the global order is shifting, and the tracks of Africa's new railway may just lead to a new world. 6. The Belt and Road Vision. To understand why this deal matters so much, we must zoom out to the bigger picture: China's Belt and Road Initiative. Launched in 2013, the Belt and Road is the largest infrastructure project in human history. Spanning across Asia, Europe, and Africa, it aims to connect more than 60% of the world's population through ports, pipelines, highways, and railroads. But while many focus on Asia or Europe, Africa is becoming the most strategic front. Why? Because Africa is a continent of resources, growth, and potential. By 2050, Africa's population will double to nearly 2.5 billion. Its cities will explode with growth. Its industries will rise. And whoever helps build Africa's infrastructure today will have influence over its economy tomorrow. This $10 billion railway deal is not just about iron ore. It's about anchoring Africa firmly into China's orbit. When African leaders stand before their people and point to gleaming new railways, bridges, and power plants, who will they thank? China. And when they need more loans, more projects, more investment, who will they turn to? Again, China. The Belt and Road isn't just about steel and concrete. It's about trust, loyalty, and shaping the 21st century. 7. Lessons from the past. This isn't the first time China has transformed Africa's landscape. In Kenya, the $3.6 billion standard gauge railway now links Nairobi to the port of Mombasa, slashing travel time and boosting trade. In Ethiopia, China built the Addis Ababa-Djibouti Railway, giving the landlocked nation a direct route to the sea. In Nigeria, Beijing financed and built massive railway projects connecting major cities and ports. Each of these projects faced Western criticism, accusations of debt, overpricing, and hidden agendas. But on the ground, ordinary Africans saw something else: trains running, roads paved, jobs created. And now, with this $10 billion iron ore railway, China is scaling up its ambitions. This isn't just another project. It's the biggest resource for infrastructure trade Africa has ever seen. 8. The Western Dilemma. The West finds itself at a crossroads. For decades, Africa was seen as an afterthought in Western strategy. Aid programs replaced real investment. Promises replaced projects. Meanwhile, the West focused on wars in the Middle East, trade with Asia, and competition with Russia. Now, suddenly, Africa has become the battleground for influence. And the West is unprepared. American companies rarely invest in large infrastructure without guarantees of profit. European governments focus more on humanitarian aid than railways. And while the West debates, China builds. This leaves Washington, Brussels, and London with a painful realization: they are losing Africa. And they know it. Behind closed doors, Western leaders express frustration. Publicly, they call China a threat, warning Africa of debt traps. But here's the truth: Africans don't see bulldozers from the West. They see them from China. And actions speak louder than warnings. 9. The global market shift. Let's talk numbers. The global iron ore market is worth hundreds of billions of dollars. Traditionally, the biggest suppliers have been Australia, Brazil, and India. China imports massive amounts from these countries, but this dependency leaves it vulnerable to price swings, politics, and sanctions. By securing 16 billion tons of African iron ore, China is changing the game. It reduces reliance on Australia, a US ally and increasingly hostile toward Beijing. It undercuts Brazil, another major supplier often aligned with Western trade networks. It gives China its own strategic resource hub on the African continent. This isn't just smart economics. It's strategic foresight. If tensions with the West escalate, China can simply turn to Africa, where it has built not just mines, but railways and ports. For Africa, this means entry into the global iron ore market on a scale never seen before. For China, it means security. And for the West, it means pressure, because without control of Africa's resources, their leverage weakens. 10. The future of Africa-China relations. So, what happens next? Africa stands at a crossroads. Partnering with China could bring the continent into a new golden age of infrastructure and growth. But it also risks long-term dependency. If Africa uses these railways wisely, they could spark industrial revolutions across the continent. Steel factories, manufacturing hubs, new trade corridors, all powered by the ore and railroads built with Chinese support. But if mismanaged, Africa could simply become a raw material supplier for China, with little to show beyond rail lines leading out of mines. The choice lies with African leaders. Will they use this moment to rise as equals? Or will they remain resource exporters tied to Beijing's ambitions? This deal is not just about iron. It's about identity. Africa must decide whether this railway will be a path to prosperity or a track leading back to dependency. For China, the answer is already clear. This is a masterstroke, a $10 billion investment securing resources, influence, and allies. For the West, it's a wake-up call. The future is being written in steel, and they are not holding the pen. And for the world? This deal is a glimpse of the 21st century to come, where railways, resources, and relationships determine power, and where China's rise seems unstoppable. The $10 billion railway for iron ore deal is more than an agreement on paper. It is a symbol of a shifting world order. China has once again demonstrated its ability to think long-term, to invest boldly, and to secure what others only dream of. 16 billion tons of iron ore, a continent-changing railway, and an alliance that stretches beyond economics into the realm of geopolitics. For Africa, this is both an opportunity and a challenge. An opportunity to build, grow, and rise like never before. A challenge to ensure that this partnership leads to prosperity, not dependency. For the West, it is a warning. The days of dominance are over. The age of neglect is catching up. While they looked elsewhere, China built and Africa noticed. Steel by steel, mile by mile, Beijing is laying not just railroads, but the foundations of the future. And the question we must all ask is this: will Africa and China together forge a new era of shared growth? Or will this be remembered as the moment the balance of global power shifted for good? One thing is certain: the world will never be the same. If you found this story eye-opening, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our deep dives into the biggest shifts shaping our world today. Tell us in the comments, do you think Africa is winning in this deal, or is China the only true winner here? Your opinion might just shape our next video.